Hello and welcome everyone to today's presentation by Grant Powell on how to identify and how to value rare coins. Once again, like our other events, you can send any questions in the through the QA button on your device, and we will hold those until the end of the presentation. Grant, you are unmuted, so you are good to go ahead and turn on your video and share your presentation.
Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Grant. Let me get my screen share going here. All right, so I will jump right in. Today we're going to talk about how to determine the value of a rare coin. Just as you can see here on this slide, I have actually a quite rare coin. This is the 1794 US silver dollar. It's the first official silver dollar minted in the US. Most of you are probably familiar with it. This particular specimen sold for $10 million. And I have it here because it's very representative of the importance of the value of a coin, especially something that's this rare where you could spend $9 or $10 or $11 million. And that's a big difference, right? A variance of $2 million. So understanding what determines the value of a coin and how you can calculate the value is a really important aspect of numismatics. All right, so today we're going to cover the challenges of coin valuation, what contributes to a coin's value, where you can get the information you need to determine a coin's value, and then how to calculate the value. And we'll finish with some thoughts on how technology is changing the way we determine coin values. All right, so just a quick bit about me. I started at Google and left to form a digital agency. From there, I'd launched a couple of tech startups, a lending platform, a music dating platform that was particularly fun, and most recently Numis, which is a coin encyclopedia and valuation app. I'm also, my true passion is numismatics, so I've got Powell coins where I buy and sell coins as a dealer, and I tend to be the #1 numismatist in Google searches in the US, given, certain days and months. So if you search for numismatist, you should find me. All right, so at the center of numismatics is determining the value of an item. As written here, whether you're buying or selling or researching or collecting, determining a value is really the most important part of numismatics, and it's probably the most difficult part. You might think of if you were a young collector or a young collector and even just at a young age, finding a coin and thinking someday this is going to be worth more is really the art of valuation. And so it's very important to numismatics. However, as I've stated, it's extremely challenging. And here are some of the challenges. So value is subjective. We can spend all day calculating what the value should be, but really at the end of the day, it's in the eye of the beholder. That's something we can't change. And as you may have noticed, more rare coins tend to have more wildly fluctuating sales prices. Common Morgan dollar is going to, track the same price for many months and maybe, slowly go up over the years. But an extremely rare coin is going to sell for a ton of money, then people lose interest and it'll go down in value, and then it'll go wildly up again when the market gets hot. It's wildly fluctuating. And then, of course, some coins track precious metal prices while others do not, which adds additional complexities and variables. So here's an example of a coin that shows how value can be subjective. Maybe you guys can all kind of ask yourselves here, what would you pay for this coin? It's a pretty common Morgan dollar. The 1881S is a common year, but it's a high grade. It's a 66 grade, and that's a less common grade. You might consider this a grade rarity. And it also has, of course, this beautiful rainbow toning. Now, some people really like that and seek out those kind of coins, and some people do not. Some people would actually pay double for a coin that has rainbow toning. If we take a look at some of the empirical data that's been published, PCGS has given this a range of 225 to 300. NGC has given it a price of 295. As an example here, coinvalues.com has not provided any information. So you have a range of 225 to 300, but the most recent sale price was actually 180. That's on heritageauctions.com. And so this is really fundamentally shows the underlying problem. You've got a range of 180 to 300, which is almost double. That is a huge difference, especially if you're getting to coins that are 100,000 or 200,000. And as it turns out, of course, because this is a rainbow toned coin, someone might actually pay 400 for it because they find it particularly eye appealing. So again, showcasing kind of the challenges of figuring out the value of a coin here. Here's an example that shows how coin prices fluctuate wildly. Now, this is actually the same coin, not the same type of coin, it's actually the same coin. And so this coin sold for $42,000 in August of 2019 on Heritage Auctions as well. And then again on Heritage Auctions for $55,000 in 2020. That's a 30% increase in just 8 months. Great return on investment if you're the person who bought it originally. Here's another example of a coin that sold for $3,000 in 2020 and $6,000 just a few months later in the same year. So that is a 100% increase in price in just 4 months. Wild. Now, more than likely what you're looking at is someone who way overpaid here, and you don't want to be that person, right? Because this coin is probably more like a $3,000 or $4,000 coin, and it's going to take many years for it to get to a realistic market price of $6,000. So the goal today is to prevent that from happening to you. You want to be the $3,000 buyer. And then, speaking a little bit about precious metals, here's an example of a coin that does track precious metal prices. It's a semi-rare, if you want to call it semi-rare, double eagle, 1884S, a less common year. It sold for about $1,500 at the beginning of this year, and now is about $2,400 because gold has gone up $1,000 an ounce. So its price is largely tracking the value of gold. Here, on the other hand, is a gold 8 escudos that's about 3/4 of an ounce of gold. And even though gold has gone up $1,000, this coin's value only went up by about $500 over the course of a year. So it didn't even go up as much as the price of gold did. So again, some more complexities here in trying to determine a value and whether a coin tracks precious metals or not. So we've got published price guides that are unreliable and have very different values across the board. We've got prices that vary wildly at auction and sales. And it's a real challenge to figure out what a coin's worth. And so how do we do that? We're going to talk about it. All right, so before you can determine the value of a coin, you have to understand what contributes to the value of a coin. And there's actually quite a few things, as it turns out. So here's a list. We've got rarity, availability, quality, and we'll talk about these things individually. Visual appeal, popularity and demand, precious metal content, which we talked about already, provenance, and other key attributes. A lot of stuff. And just sort of taking it from the top here. So the first factor is rarity. I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with this. Rarity is how many exist, but don't confuse that with how many were made. There could have been a lot made, like certain Morgan dollar years, but then those coins were melted down due to a government ordinance to reuse the metal for war purposes or something like that. So it's really about how many exist. Don't let the mintage numbers mislead you. They can do that sometimes. Here's some other things that can contribute why a low amount may exist, even though a high amount was minted. Melted down for war, melted down for jewelry, reused for subsequent year coinages, or just lost over the years. Coins, there tends to be attrition over the years and coins disappear. So in a sense, all coins are becoming more rare as time goes on. Availability. So something like, let's say, the 1921 peace dollar is, in high grades especially, is not very available, even though it's a pretty common coin if you look at the mintage numbers. And if you look at the grading numbers, how many have been graded? So it's not necessarily what I would call a rare coin, but it's hard to find. So because it's hard to find, buyers might pay a little more whenever it becomes available for sale, especially if it's a particularly nice specimen. So availability is something that also affects the value of a coin, even if it's less rare. Some things that decrease decrease the availability of a coin would be, that very popular coins tend to be hoarded, right? So if you're lucky enough to get a good one, you keep it. certain coins, gold coins that track precious metal prices, would also be hoarded if the price drops, because people want to wait until the value goes up before they release them into the market again, before they sell them. And certain coins like Cuban coins, which I'm particularly interested in, are not allowed to be sold on sites like eBay, so they're hard to find. They're less available. And so that would make them more valuable. So availability. All right, the third aspect, quality, which is another one that I'm sure you all are familiar with. Most commonly, we refer to the quality of the coin as its grade, and we give it a single number, 1 through 70, from the grading companies. But you maybe have heard the term buy the coin, not the grade. And that means, cover the grade when you first pick up the coin and look at it and think about what you think that coin, what its grade is or what its quality is before you actually see the grade. Because you don't want to buy a coin that's a 63 when it's like maybe overgraded, or that's an AU58 but is really dark and has lost all of its silver luster. It's not worth as much as another AU58 that might still have that shine. So when you consider quality, don't just consider the grade. Consider, strike, surfaces, and detail. Those are the obvious ones. Consider its luster, right? If it's a silver coin, is it bright and shiny? Should it be bright and shiny? Does it have proof-like surfaces? Does it have rainbow toning, if you're into that, or other toning that makes it look nice? Cabinet patina, sometimes people call it. For older coins, less modern coins, is it struck in a very nice centered way, or is it off-centered? Can you see any die cracks, which don't necessarily lower the quality of the coin? It depends on the series, because some coins, they'll have multiple dies, and certain dies will be really nice, and other ones will have die cracks. And so finding a coin that does not have the die crack is going to be a more valuable and more desirable specimen. And of course, the rims, which is something I personally always forget to look at. You do want to make sure it's got nice original rims around the edge of the coin. So to further complicate quality, it can be relative to the coin series. As some examples here, an MS68 for a silver eagle dollar is considered low, right? 68 out of 70, and it's like, oh, who wants that? It's basically coal, precious metal content, who cares? However, if you get a 68 for a silver Morgan dollar, that's considered very high. Like, there are very few 68 Morgan dollars. And a 68 value for any coin prior to 1800 is extremely high, right? You start getting into medieval coins. You'd be lucky if you find something that's a 45. So the quality is relative, right? It also is relative based on the equipment that was available to manufacture the coin back in the day. If you get further back to pre-milled coins, hammered coins, stuff like that, the quality is always going to be lower than a modern coin, but it's relative to the series. And what's really important to note about quality is that the value increases geometrically with higher grades. And so I have a chart here to represent what that means. And I've basically estimated that a coin tends to go up 1.75 or 175% the value each grade it jumps. So a coin, for example, that's $100 in XF is going to be 275 in AU. However, a coin that's MS64 is 10,000. It's going to be 17,565 and almost $30,000 in 66. That's a $20,000 jump in just 2 grades. And this is from many years of looking at coin prices, and I'm sure you guys have seen similar trends. But it's very important to note that the grade grows geometrically, really accelerates in those much higher grades. One of the ones that I like to use as an example is the 1934S peace dollar, where an XFAU, you can pick it up for a couple $100, but then as soon as it hits MS, you're talking 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, and you'll get up to $30,000 for those high uncirculated coins. This is, it's a $100 or $200 coin, no big deal. But those really high grades really jump up in value. So quality is obviously a very important factor. All right, now some more about visual appeal. So this goes back to a little bit of the value being in the eye of the beholder. Different people look for different visual appeal, and so you've got to find out what works for you or what's trending in the marketplace. Sometimes rainbow coins are more popular, sometimes they're less popular. But some things that, contribute to visual appeal or how stunning a coin is, right? It's going to be brightness and luster or shininess of silver coins. And so I've got an example here of a particularly lustrous 1921 peace dollar. Some things that have toning or patina. This is some very nice toning here. I wouldn't call this rainbow toning per se, more patina, but looks very original, very antique, very beautiful. And then proof-like, which is hard to capture in photos, but this is a Cuban proof coin here, and it has very reflective mirror-like surfaces. And then of course, in very high grades, you want to look at the detailed little hairlines and everything that give it that really sharp appeal, smooth, unaltered surfaces in the fields, and perfect centering, of course. So visual appeal is something that contributes to a coin sort of subjectively. It'll change the value to different people. All right, and popularity and demand is really important. This is what I call the X factor in a coin's value. You could take the same two coins that are very similar, right? Let's say like a peace dollar and a Morgan dollar. And they both had about 1 million minted, and they both have about the same number of uncirculated grades available. But for some reason, the Morgan dollar tends to be a more popular series. And so the price of that coin could be worth a lot more than its peace dollar counterpart, even though they're the same rarity, same availability, same quality. All those things are the same and comparable, but the popularity and demand for the Morgan dollar is higher, and that's going to drive the price up. This is something that is very hard to track. It changes over time. It can change quickly, but it's also very important to understand. So if you're ever looking at a coin and being like, wow, there's only 10,000 of these made, for example, the gold $1, US gold $1, all of those have low mintages. I look at some proofs that have maybe 1,600 minted, and that proof will sell for $1,000, $2,000. But if that was a Morgan dollar proof, it might be $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000. So that's a great example. The gold $1 coins tend to be less popular, in my experience. Reasons for popularity could be a recent study published that determined coins are more rare than originally thought, so there's fewer in existence, even though a large number was minted. Or a well-known collector has expressed interest in a certain coin, saying, hey, these are really interesting, you should collect them. That'll drive up interest. The supply and demand can change. Who knows why or how? I saw this a lot with $500 notes and $1,000 notes. Somebody started buying all them up, and next thing you know, the prices started going up. Supply and demand. And of course, just unknown reasons for trending. So popularity and demand is really important, but also really hard to track. Precious metal content, you guys all kind of know how this works. It's the melt value of a coin. The value is based purely on the weight of precious metal content in the coin. Keep in mind sometimes that 1 ounce coins do not actually contain 1 ounce of precious metal. So make sure, for example, the Liberty Double Eagles are 0.9675. They're less than 1 ounce of gold. That's very important because that's a 5% difference versus an entire 1 ounce of gold. And usually coins that track precious metal prices have a specific premium that they put on top of the precious metal value. So the silver eagle is always going to go for about $5 over the silver value. That's kind of a fixed premium. A common double eagle is going to go for about $50 over its gold value. And so really these are coins that track the prices of precious metals. All right, provenance. This is an interesting one. Some people care about this a lot, some do not. But provenance refers to the history of a coin, often in who owned it. So provenance can be designated by a famous collector who was known for having the finest specimens of a particular region or type of coin, a political figure or a well-known company that has a large collection of coins. Provenance could denote that something was a part of a significant collection, like the EMO collection here in the Cuban coins. Provenance can also point to when a coin was sold. And that's actually really helpful in determining value. A lot of times you'll see rare coins that will say, provenance, and it'll say sold at this auction on this date and previously sold at this auction on this date. And that way you can kind of track, what people were willing to pay historically for this coin, and that'll give you some indicator as to its value. Provenance used to be more important in determining authenticity of a coin, because you could track ownership far back and know that it was original and not a fake replica. That's less of a, I don't want to say less of a concern, but less considered these days, since we rely heavily on the grading companies to guarantee the authenticity. But it still remains important to a lot of people just in having that historic significance. So in conclusion, this can drive the value of a coin price up. At a minimum, it provides support if you're trying to get a high value for a coin that you're selling. It's proof that this is an important coin. It was owned by significant people. It got significant prices at significant auctions. It at a minimum supports the value that you're trying to get. All right, key attributes. Now these are some things that I have sort of discovered personally over time. Other people might disagree with me on this. But these are things that I find affect the value of coins. These are things that could change as well. I'll give you some examples. So these key attributes are just various aspects of coins that either make them more interesting or more popular and thereby more valuable. Age and time period. So from what I've seen, older coins tend to be more interesting, more rare, and more valuable. Even if they're, for example, 2009 ultra high relief gold eagle was minted in the US. I think there was 50,000 made. I think that's right. That's a pretty low mintage, right? Especially for modern coins. But if you find a coin that only had 50,000 minted, like 8 reales or something from Mexico, that coin's going to get a lot higher premium. Of course, the gold coin has its precious metal weight that contributes value, but because it's an older coin, more interesting, there's attrition, the coins disappear over time, age tends to add value to the coin. Certain time periods can also add value to a coin, such as 1822 to 23, when Mexico was ruled by Iturbide. I'm probably going to butcher that name. There were only a couple years that Mexican coins were minted with his head on the coin. And so that makes it a particularly interesting time period, even if there were a large number of coins minted that year. It's sort of a very finite time period and interesting. I find that larger coins tend to get higher values. For example, Philippines proof pesos from 1905 will sell for much more than the proof 10-cent piece from the same year, same grade, same number minted. I think it's like 475. So there's 475 proof pesos, 475 proof 10-cent pieces. They're each proof 65. The 10-cent piece might go for $1,000. The peso will go for maybe $5,000. Big difference there, because it's a larger coin. It tends to attract more interest. In design, people don't want unattractive coins, so the ones that have beautiful designs tend to get higher prices. But there are certain pieces that are interestingly ugly or uniquely ugly, like this Scottish hat coin here. It's the only coin known to have this sort of hat fashion statement, and is particularly interesting for that reason, and will command a much higher price, even though it's not necessarily more rare and not necessarily more beautiful. All right, so we've broken down a ton of different factors that contribute to the value of a coin. And so hypothetically, if we can get all this information, we could figure out a coin's value. So let's talk a little bit about where do we find this information. Well, lucky for us, and thanks to technology, we live in an era where this information is largely available. If you can't find it on some of your usual resources, go to Google and you'll probably find some numismatists blogging about it, or some historic coin newsletter that's been scanned and published online, or some past auction data from 30 years ago that provides you the information that will help you determine the value. So here are some of the tools that I find most useful. NGC Coin Explorer, PCGS CoinFacts. CoinFactsWiki.com has some really hard to find information I can only find there. It's very helpful. Obviously, the large auction houses where you can see past prices. Numismatics.com, where you can search for across many auction houses with a single search, very helpful. And talking to local numismatists. You know, in New York, there's a numismatist that I'm friendly with who's been doing this for 40 years, and he will tell you things that you can't find published anywhere about US coins and how much they used to be worth and which ones are of interest to people. Don't forget about books. Well, I know a lot of us don't read physical books as much these days, but there's a lot of books published on all coin series. And of course, if all else fails, go to Google. So this is general places where you can get information. So how do we use this information to calculate a coin's value, right? This is really what matters most here. I have a bit of a breakdown here of how I've composed a pricing engine in my mind, essentially. And I've tested this and used this, you know, time and time again whenever I'm bidding on coins at auctions. And so I'll explain it a little bit, and then we'll actually work through an example that I have of a coin I was considering buying, and we'll see what value it comes out with. So I know everybody has a different approach. None are perfect. You have to remember that at the end of the day, the value's in the eye of the beholder. So you could mathematically calculate any value you want, but if somebody really wants that coin, they're going to pay whatever they have to get it. All right. So base price. There's sort of an assumption here that you can get a base price. There are some cases where you cannot because there's no data available on a coin if it's a one of a kind or it's the first time at auction. But we're going to assume that 99% of the time you'll be able to get some sort of base price. And this is calculated as the average value from estimated values provided by either price guides, coin experts, or auction houses. So most auction houses, when they publish a coin for auction, they'll give you a range of value that they think it's worth. A scoring system. So I've got my scoring system to the right. This is a scoring system that adjusts the price based on certain attributes and certain variables. And you can actually change the scoring system based on what matters to you. So if you care about a certain time period more than somebody else because it's historically important to you personally, you might increase the value score for the time period. Or if you like small coins, you might change the way the size percentage is factored. But this is my scoring system that I use. And then of course, historical sales. So, you know, if someone was to ask me, what's the simplest way to get the value of a coin? Just look at what it sells for. However, we want more, you know, as collectors and investors, we want to know more than just what a coin is selling for now. We want to know, does it have the potential to sell for more in the future? And that's why historical sales doesn't always give us enough information. You know, because coins may be selling cheaply now that could be considered sleepers. You've maybe heard that term before, which means that they're undervalued, underappreciated, and that might change in the future, which means that the coin's value would jump significantly. And we want to be able to anticipate and estimate that using our valuation and scoring system. All right, so here's an example of a coin that was minted in Ethiopia. I'm going to butcher all of these words, so I apologize if I'm pronouncing them incorrectly. But it was a pair of coins, which makes it particularly challenging to figure out the price of. They weren't selling one coin, they were selling both. And it went at auction. So it's a pair of certified pattern coins, right? Silver pattern coins from Ethiopia. I guess the date on the coin was 1885, but they were actually minted in 1893. So let's start with the price guidance, right? We want to start with our base price. Here's what we know. Heritage Auctions had this estimated at 8,000 to 10,000. Okay, that's their opinion. NGC price guide, none, none. PCGS, none. So we've got one person telling us it's worth a high amount of money. I have no idea what their basis is. So let's dig a little deeper. I was able to utilize CoinFacts Wiki to find what this had auctioned for in the past. And that was really helpful. So as it turns out, here's some of your provenance, right? This had a provenance of being sold at a Baldwin's auction, 2014. I've got links here if we need to pull them up. And they sold for 800 and 900 Great Britain pound sterling. They were estimated at 800 to 900, but actually sold for 2,000 to 2,800. So now we've got another problem. The previous auction house estimated this quite less than it actually sold for. I did look up the exchange rate at that time, and that was about $3,200 and $4,500 that it sold for at that time. This was 2014, 6 years ago. Let's see. And so lastly, I was able to find another example of a similar coin on Heritage Auctions that sold 7 years ago for about $4,000, but it was not the pattern coin. It was the mint strike coin intended for circulation. So based on, I had done a lot of other searching. I'd gone to Google, I'd gone to Numisbids, I'd gone to all these other sites. I'd tried to find anything I could. And the only information I was able to find was this stuff. So a particularly challenging coin, but I'll show you how this system that I use will work, even for coins with very little information. So based on my understanding of this coin and the information I could find, this is the analysis that I gave it, right? So here are each of the attributes that contribute to the value of a coin, either up or down or neutral. Green means up, red means down, yellow, orange means neutral. So this is extremely rare. In Heritage Auctions description, they said this is possibly unique, and I think that's right. These coins are both unique, one of a kind. The availability is basically none, right? There is one available. So these things are very highly going to contribute to the value of this coin. The quality is actually moderate, given that the grades were, I don't think I wrote them down here. I think they were AU58 and MS61, respectively. However, they were given a top pop designation, top population in terms of their grade, because they're one of a kind. And it's a pretty high grade for such a rare coin. Usually when coins are extremely rare, there's only a few known, you're likely to find a specimen that's an XF. So here we had what would normally be considered a moderate grade for 17, 18, 1900s, is actually quite a high grade for a coin that's so rare. All right, so in addition to that, I took a look at the visual appeal, and I gave it a high visual appeal. Not very high, but high. It's well struck, it's centered, no toning. It did have some minor surface blemishes. I don't think you guys can see it, but there's a ring of die crack around here. And one of them, and in a couple images, you could see it had some surface wear. That's why they gave it the AU grade. So medium to high. And popularity demand low. So this was interesting. My analysis of this said that this was not a very popular coin. And this is a problem you have commonly for coins that are too rare. They're so rare that nobody knows they exist. Therefore, they're not seeking them out. This coin, had only been auctioned once 6 years ago. It had been forgotten. Nobody knows about it. And so it actually did not get bid on at the auction. This was the post-auction sale this was available for when I was researching it. So this is a negative. Even though it's an extremely rare coin, there's no demand for it. You have to take that into consideration. Precious metal content is low because they're small coins. It actually is high in terms that it's mostly silver, but it's low. The amount of silver that's in there is maybe worth, $3 or $4. Provenance is good. It has some provenance as being sold at Baldwin's, and with a particular price that's going to support the value of this coin. The age I put as red because it's relatively modern, late 1800s. I would not consider this an old coin. Time period I said is actually significant. This is because this is considered to be the last coin that was minted at the Harar Mint prior to the city's capture. Right? So it's historically significant and last of its kind. So I'd say that's a significant attribute of the coin. The size is small, which I put as kind of like neutral, negative. The design is nice, but not particularly appealing. So it's kind of a neutral attribute of the coin. So this was my analysis. Your analysis might be slightly different. We're going to go with this for now. All right, so based on my analysis, here's kind of a breakdown of how I calculated the value. So you've got a price range that's $1,000 to $5,000 each. That's an average of $3,000 each. So this is based on estimates, right? The original Baldwin's estimate, the Heritage Auctions estimate. So I gave it a base estimated price of $3,000 and $3,500. And that's because one coin is larger and higher graded, so it's going to be slightly more valuable. And so this combined is $6,500. Then I took a look at each of the attributes. I gave it a plus 25% value because of rarity, plus 10% because of its low availability, plus 10% because of its quality. Again, it's pretty high for such a rare coin. Plus 5% for its visual appeal, it's well struck. Minus 25% for popularity demand because nobody's seeking out this coin. A very small amount of value for precious metal content. I gave it 0 for provenance, which you could factor that differently. You could give it some value for provenance. I gave it a minus 5% for age because it's a relatively modern coin, plus 5% because of its interesting time period, minus 5% because it's small, and minus 5% because it's not particularly interesting in its design. So when you run that calculation, did I provide that? I didn't put it here. So that's the most important thing, which I didn't put in the presentation. Oh no, here it is. When I ran that calculation, I came to a combined value of $7,800. As it turns out, it was listed on Heritage Auctions for $9,000. And of course, I should add, so I ran my calculation, came to 7,800, cross-referenced that with its past sale of 7,700. And as you can see, very close value. So what this is telling us is that the scoring system and analysis and price calculation here is very accurately tracking what it sold for 6 years ago. And when I looked at that compared to the price it was listed on Heritage Auctions, I decided to pass. Honestly, though, the biggest reason I passed was because the demand, popularity demand. You buy a coin like this, you're going to sit on it potentially for a long time until you find someone who's interested. But there's one other factor that I did not take into account for this, which is that this coin was sold 6 years ago. And generally speaking, there's going to be inflation, right? So even if coins only go up 3% per year, we're talking about, a 20% increase potentially. So if you factor that in, some other, adjustments here and there, it actually does get you right to the $9,000 price. So it's up to you whether or not you would purchase something like this that's that rare at $9,000, but the price does seem to be supported. And kudos to Heritage Auctions for listing a price estimate that I think is pretty accurate. All right, so hopefully that was clear. I'm sure you guys will have questions we'll talk through in a minute, but before we do, I'm gonna give you guys a couple thoughts on how technology is changing the way we determine coin values. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, they're going to change everything, not just in coins, in any industry. Right? We've seen the sci-fi movies where machines become more intelligent than humans. They take over the world. And, I think the time is near when computers are going to have the ability to analyze and compute things better than we can as humans. In some ways, they already do. They're certainly better at math than I am. And thank goodness, because I don't like doing math. So computers can do these things in real time. They can automatically collect information from multiple sources, which I had to do manually. They can instantly calculate values based on a scoring system that's defined, which again, I had to do manually. And they can predict pricing trends by looking at how the coins of prices have changed over time, which is, another calculation that can be complex and time consuming. They can do these things instantly, automatically. So imagine if you could search for any coin and instantly see all these different attributes, which there's like 12 of them, that contribute to the value of a coin, instead of having to seek them out and doing all that work. And then imagine if that machine could take all those attributes and instantly calculate them to give you the value of an item. So that's what we're trying to do at Numis. We're trying to, figure out what exactly is the right scoring system, the right way to calculate the value of a coin, and then teach your computer to do it for us. And so here's a little bit about Numis. Our app is coming soon. You can learn more at numis.com, but the whole point of Numis is to instantly get the value of any coin, any collectible currency. And it's also photo-based. So you take a photo of the coin, it'll identify it, and then tell you its value. Pretty good stuff. This is a little bit about the technology we're doing. We're aggregating historical data. We built a proprietary scoring system that, is kind of similar to what I showed you guys, but much more complicated. We're devising a learning algorithm so that it can follow and learn on its own without us having to teach it. And try and build technology that can track, current prices as well as predictions and give people all the knowledge they need to make smart purchases, because that's really what it's about. If you're going to invest in rare coins, you need to make a smart purchase. Otherwise, you'll lose money. And that's all I got.
All righty. Thank you so much, Grant. If you want to end the share screen, I can go ahead and list off some of these questions. Once again, if you want to ask Grant any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A and we'll list them off. Starting off, Brian Heller asks and is asking about the use of gray sheets or CPG and sort of your thoughts on the uses of that for grading.
Great question. So one of the biggest problems with other coin valuation companies is that they give you the value that the coin should have. And so what I think is more important is to understand the actual value, right? So you take a look at the very first Morgan dollar example we looked at. The value it should have is between $225 and $300, but it just sold for $180 at Heritage Auctions. And if it was rainbow toned, it might sell for $400. So those actual values are very different than the should have values. And so I don't personally put a ton of stock into the gray sheets should have values. That's the opinion, from what I understand of their process, is the opinions of a few people who they do use data, to their credit. But this is what they think the coin should be worth versus what it actually is worth.
Understandable. Following that, Amber asks, do these techniques work for both US and foreign coins? Also, you were saying something like the year printed on the coin may not be the year it was actually minted. If that's the case, how can you tell how old a coin is?
All right, so two questions there. The first one, yes, this concept does 100% work with world coins. The challenge, though, is that, the example we did here was a world coin, right, the Ethiopian coin. The challenge is that there tends to be less information available the older the coin gets. And in the US economy, right, we only started minting coins in 1794. So all of our coins are modern. US collectors think, oh, 1700s, that's so early. But in Great Britain, they're like, yeah, 1700 is modern. We've been minting coins since the year 1100. And when you go that far back, they don't know how many were minted. And it's hard to track how many exist. And so yes, it does still work if you can find the data. So that's the hard part. That's question number one. Sorry, what was question two again?
Question two was, you were saying something like the year printed on a coin may not be the year minted.
So the good thing is that most coins, if they have a different year minted on the coin, there's usually a historical reference somewhere, right? And this goes back to physical books, where people would keep record of why things were minted. These are government records. And so most of the time you can find out when the coin was actually made. There's a coin that I find particularly interesting. It's the Bulgaria 100 leva gold proof. And I'm trying to remember the year that was minted on it, but it's actually quite modern. It was minted in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s. But I think it has a date on the coin that's like 100 years older. Anyways, it's an interesting coin, but that data generally exists. I have not yet found a coin with a date on it that I didn't know the difference. So the information is pretty available.
Nice. Brian Hiller asks, what do you do when calculating the base price if it is widely varied from different sources? How do you sort of find a starting base price to work with?
Yeah, so what I did, and I apologize if I went over that too quickly, is I actually take the average. So if you get a few different price points, one's 1,000, one's 5,000, one's 4,000, you kind of average that, and you're at about 2,500, and that's my base price, right? That's never going to be the end price. It's just a starting point.
Awesome. All right. An anonymous attendee asks, how does a CAC sticker or old holder like PCGS Rattler factor into your scoring system when applicable?
Good question. I haven't specifically factored in either of those. I can tell you though, from what I understand, is that the CAC sticker, the CAC sticker, a lot of times what that is it's a price supporting mechanism. So again, if a coin is worth, based on your calculation, $10,000, you can confidently buy that at $10,000 versus maybe saying, well, it does kind of look like it's a little overgraded, and I'm not sure if I want to pay the full $10,000. I'll offer $9,000. The CAC sticker sort of gives the seller the confidence that they're going to get the full $10,000 for that coin. So a lot of people think, oh, a coin's worth $9,000, but it's worth $10,000 with the CAC sticker. I actually think of it the opposite. It's a $10,000 coin. If it doesn't have a CAC sticker, though, you can't necessarily get the full value because you don't have that confidence. And keep in mind that the CAC sticker is just another person's opinion, right? The grading company gives it an opinion, and then the CAC company gives it their opinion. And it's a question of whether or not their opinion agrees with the grading company. But those opinions could be different from your opinion, which also matters. So when you're buying coins, you have to have confidence in how you feel about the coin, regardless of what the grading company says and regardless of the CAC sticker.
Interesting.
And there was a second question, right? The old holders, the old BCGS holders. I think generally people consider that the grading companies have gotten more, more caring, more scrutinous over the years. So they were a little bit more lenient in their grades in older holders. So if something's a 65 in an old holder, it's maybe a 64 if you were to send it back in. But I don't have any empirical data that really supports that belief. I just know that is the common belief.
Interesting. Following that, when will Numis be available for a cost? And is there an estimated time when you think this would be available?
Good question. Yeah, so it's definitely something that's being rolled out this year. And we're experimenting with different models, potentially having some initial aspects of it for free. But in any case, it would not be very expensive, maybe something like a couple bucks a month. So we're hoping to make a coin valuation available to everyone. There's apparently 150 million coin collectors in the US.
Oh, interesting.
Big community.
Gotcha. Richard asks, would your system work for exonumia items?
That's a great question. I think it could, but I do think that there are certain factors that have to be considered overall. Like with exonumia, metals, tokens, stuff like that, the mintages are always really low, right? You've got like 10 metals that are made. So you're gonna have to adjust your scoring system because it's relative. Just so you have to kind of with different coin series, right? So $1 million piece dollars is considered a low mintage, but if it was a gold $1 and you had 100,000 minted, well, that would be considered actually a common gold $1 because the series tends to be really low minted. And then with metals, there's only 10, and that would be considered a common metal because there were 10 made versus 2. So you just have to adjust your scoring system relative to what it is that you're trying to price.
That makes sense. An anonymous attendee asks, how does toning, especially rainbow toning, affect visual appeal and value?
The answer is it's subjective. So it depends on who you ask. I personally love rainbow toning, and I would pay more money for a rainbow token coin. I think I would pay anywhere from 10 to 25% more. There are people who will pay 100% more. But there are other people who would say, well, that coin's no longer in original condition. I want the bright white silver dollar that's like it's fresh off the mint, and they don't want the toning. So it really is subjective. There's no straight answer there.
Awesome. How do you include auction firms into the calculations?
Auctions?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, auction prices are largely a cross-referencing system. So you're gonna get your estimated value from published price guides, from auction house estimates, and you're gonna get your base price. Then you're gonna calculate, all the attributes and features to determine what you think the coin is worth, or what your scoring system thinks it's worth. And then you're gonna cross-reference that with historical sales. And so what I would do is if I calculated a coin to be worth $5,000, but saw that it recently sold for $10,000, well, the first thing I would do is look further back. Be like, okay, well, it sold for $10,000 recently. What did it sell for before? And if it keeps going back to 10,000, 9,000, 10,500, 9,500, and sort of supports that high price, what that means is that your popularity factor is off. The coin's value is 5,000 plus because it's extremely popular coin and people are willing to pay the extra money for it. So that's why you use the auction sales as a guide to cross-reference your scoring system and make sure that you factor things in correctly. It really is that if it's that far off, it's usually going to be the popularity. That's why I said earlier in the presentation, that's the X factor, that it's impossible to predict and it changes all the time.
Nice. On this, we have a question from Daniel L. O'Brien asking, how do you arrive at the percentages to add or subtract for each item? Will your new product allow a person to customize these numbers if they believe the item should have a different influence on the overall value, i.e. instead of a 25% adjustment for age, or an individual may feel that this number should only have a cause of 20% adjustment? Will there be ways to sort of customize some of these gradings, sort of like you said, where some of the qualities might be subjective? Maybe will there be a way to input your own subjective measurements into that?
Got you. So my answer to that is actually going to be a question. Why would you want to do that? Because the goal here in valuing a coin is to determine what the market as a whole values a coin. And in order to do that, it's not necessarily about how you would specifically price the coin. It's about how the coin prices have been averaging. So the scoring system has to take into account big data. If it's auctioning at these different prices, and the scoring system is factored in all these variables, it has to adjust those variables if the pricing isn't right, because it has to be able to predict what it's going to sell next. And if you feel that the coin is maybe not as eye appealing because it's darkly toned, or not as pretty of a design, and you're going to lower that scoring system, it doesn't matter in a sense. That coin is still going to sell for a higher price, even though you value it lower. I do think it's important for you to understand what coins you buy, because you have to buy the coins that you're passionate about and that you are attracted to, because then you shouldn't always just buy the coin because it's popular. I think that collecting and even investing is really about buying into things that you believe in. And so it's an interesting question to see if there'd be features for you to change the calculation, but I don't know if it would be doing a service to you, because it would then allow you to adjust the price of the coin up or down regardless of what is actually happening in the market. So this is hard to answer simply, but the goal of the scoring system is to take into account all the data, all the sales, all the variables, and predict what a coin will sell for, regardless of what you think it's worth.
Nice.
Hope that answers the question.
Following up, Amber wanted to ask, do the earlier techniques for grading work in a similar fashion for US and foreign dollar bills as well?
So if I understand the question correctly, was the question about grading or about value?
Or about value?
Value. Yes, but again, relative to the series, right? So what would make a note more appealing would be like, really sharp inking, not blurred ink, making sure that the paper doesn't have any wrinkles in it. So the same concepts all apply in terms of rarity, availability, quality. But the demand is going to be different because there's a different demographic. Usually, well, there's crossover, but there tends to be people who, some people who only collect notes, some people only collect coins, and so popularity is going to be relative. Quality is going to be based on different features, right? Coins, large coins tend to sell for more money. That doesn't necessarily mean that large bills sell for more money. I would say that the vast majority of the concepts are the same. There's maybe a few that you would want to adjust, such as size of coin, and then you'd want to take a look at things relative. So mintage is relative. A common coin that has 1 million, or again, the peace dollar with 1 million is considered rare, but 1 million of a certain note might be considered very common. So you have to take those things relatively. But in general, yes, the scoring system will work for really any collectible, to be honest. You just have to make sure that you take into account relative factors and industry-specific factors.
So we have just 3 minutes left, so we'll have a last round to ask questions before any closing statements. Trish asks, will your app be able to determine authenticity?
Yes, but not in its first release. We're using image recognition technology to drive the AI that can identify the coin and tell you variations as well as estimated quality, and then yes, authenticity. But it takes a massive amount of data and actual computer training hours to teach an artificial intelligence, and so it's just a matter of time until we get it right.
Oh, sounds very exciting. I believe that's all we'll have for questions today. Grant, did you have any closing statements or anything you wanted to say? Thanks again for the presentation. I know I learned quite a bit on how to really value a coin and a lot of factors I didn't even consider looking into. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thanks for everybody for listening. Great questions. So thank you for all those. And yeah, I want to stress that at the end of the day, try to buy the coins that you really like. That matters. That matters a lot.
That's awesome. All right. I believe we have one more time block for the rest of the day. So we'll be closing out. And thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Feel free to tune in to our last session starting right at 5. And we'll see you all then. All right. Bye.